Story webinar featuring the Pierce Family Foundation and Spanish Coalition for Housing. My name is Rusty Stahl. I'm President and CEO of Fund the People, and I'm thrilled to be moderating this conversation today, along with my colleague at the webinar controls, Yolanda Caldera-Durant, who's our Director of Programs. We're both very excited. Thank you for making time today to join us, and thanks to our special presenters. The agenda for this conversation will start with this welcome. I'll give you a brief overview of Fund the People as context. We'll hear from our speakers, first from Marianne from the Pierce Family Foundation, and then Gabriela from the Spanish Coalition for Housing. We'll have some back and forth with them, and then we'll open it up for Q&A with our participants. We will be using the chat function to gather your questions and comments. So please, throughout the webinar, during the presentations, feel free to chat. Use the chat function to send Yolanda your questions or comments. And at the end, Yolanda will share some next steps for participants. So I'll start with a brief overview of why we're all here today. Our webinar objectives are to gain an understanding of Pierce Family Foundation's talent investing practices, learn the impact that talent investing is having at the Spanish Coalition for Housing, and to highlight opportunities from these stories for funders and nonprofits to begin or to deepen your own talent investing practices in your organization or in the organizations you support. This webinar it was open to and is open to folks from the foundation community and the wider nonprofit arena, so we may have a mix of questions coming from those perspectives. A little bit about Fund the People. We got started in 2014 because we saw a real problem in the field that there's a chronic and systemic deficit of investment in nonprofit leaders and professionals. We saw that 1% or less of foundation dollars and nonprofit budget dollars are going to investments in nonprofit people and staff in particular. And we've seen that through data from the Foundation Center and other sources. We've envisioned a different sector in the future in which we have a powerful, inclusive nonprofit workforce with the support it needs to build high-performing, high-impact, sustainable teams, organizations, and causes. So we've developed our mission to maximize investment in the nonprofit workforce. And that investment can come from foundations, from corporations, from government, or from the nonprofit board and staff itself. We do focus on trying to change foundation behavior because that is a flexible opportunity. Foundations have a lot of opportunities to change their practices more than government and have more incentives than individual donors to support organizational effectiveness. This next slide shows our essential argument that a rising tide of investment in the nonprofit workforce can yield rising people, rising performance, and rising impact. So today, we actually get to turn all of that nice sounding theory into a real story that's current and real in the field, real organizations, and real people in particular in Chicago, the great city of Chicago, I should say. So we're pleased to have with us today Marianne Philbin from the Pierce Family Foundation and Gabriela Roman from the Spanish Coalition for Housing. You got their full bios in the materials about this webinar, but I will give you a brief version. And they're both very impressive and worth reading the full bios. Marianne Philbin is Executive Director of Pierce Family Foundation. She has more than 25 years experience in both foundations and nonprofits. She's co-author of 2 books on nonprofit effectiveness. Previously, she served as development director for the Chicago Annenberg Challenge, as executive director of the Chicago Foundation for Women during its critical startup period, and as executive director of the Peace Museum. She's also served on numerous boards, including Amnesty International USA. Gabriela Roman is executive director at Spanish Coalition for Housing, a HUD-certified housing counseling agency that serves over 10,000 families a year. Previously, she was director of development at the same nonprofit, and she has more than 20 years in the housing field and 17 years in nonprofit management. She's raised over $25 million in grants from various sources to strengthen Chicago communities. She says she's dedicated to inspiring financial stability and economic opportunity for all families. And in addition to her role as executive director, she's also vice president of the Chicago Low Income Housing Trust Fund and a member of the Chicago Housing Authority's Underrepresented Populations Resource Group. She holds a master's in urban planning from the University of Illinois at Chicago. Let me kick it off with Marianne from Pierce Family Foundation. Thanks, Marianne, for being here with us today. I'd love for you to tell us the story of why the Pierce Family Foundation began investing in nonprofit leadership and talent, what you've done, how it's evolved, and to kick off the conversation with that.
Great, thanks, Rusty. And I love that right before your bio, you included in the introduction that we're real people at real organizations, which is like just so important to be aware of these days. Anyway, thank you. This is great. So the Pierce Family Foundation is relatively young, and when we began a little over 10 years ago, it was already with the idea that our support would be directed to back office operations, to making the mothership strong, so to speak, that would be supporting whatever satellites in terms of programs that may have been sent out. If you want to flip the slide, Yolanda. So that orientation from the beginning really is where our strong belief in the importance of commitment to investing in staff came from, because we see that as very much a part of what real costs are. And often foundations, you know, and it's a long story why, where both foundations and nonprofits can be confused by or less than clear on, or there can be some mutual obfuscation about what does it really cost to achieve the outcome that both parties, both funder and grantee, want to see achieved. And a huge part of that is always staff. You know, that there was supposedly an old famous saying that Jimmy Carter said when in office, that even the State Department knows that if there ain't a desk for it, it ain't going to happen, right? So as much as we've all seen brilliant projects and great initiatives and important needs attempting to be addressed, if it doesn't come with a piece that actually supplies talented, appropriate staff to actually do the work, you spend many months or years in meetings in really interesting discussions that don't necessarily net an outcome. Next slide, please. So we also think that part of what has sometimes been a history of a lack of investment and support for staff not only challenges any nonprofit's ability to be, you know, sustainable, so-called, though that's a problematic word in itself, but using the term, it's actually part of the cause of it, and can really further this whole myth that nonprofit leaders, particularly at the top, are just these sort of magical unicorns that are charismatic and amazing and full of fire and brilliance, and they're going to get it done no matter what, and they should do it all on a shoestring. And we've all built that myth together because sometimes that's what it takes to get things done. Sometimes it's actually true. But, you know, the downside to it is that it has enabled a lot of us to sidestep how much is that person getting paid, you know, and what happens when they try to start a family? Are they going to stay? Are they going to go? What happens when that family gets a little older and there are kids who need to go to college and, you know, the ED is still making little to nothing? A big issue we've seen in a lot of the programs we fund also is it starts from there and works down, right? So if an organization is not appropriately compensating the CEO, you can imagine what happens to positions lower down the pyramid there. Next slide, please. So we do this in a variety of ways. Not all these programs did we develop on day one, but we've been developing them over time. One that we began with, which has been very important to us over the years, is consultants, which we call support specialists, more or less on call to the set of grantees we refer to as core grantees. Core grantees are those agencies that, I mean, we all naturally tend to have groups that we hold a little closer, invest in at slightly higher levels, et cetera, have different kinds of relationships with, and we identify that group very explicitly rather than just have it kind of organically evolve. So core grantees get a set of services, supports, and infusions of assistance in ways that just our one-off annual fund grantees don't, because on a just sheerly budget and practical way on that level, we couldn't provide all this to everybody we fund, so we provide it to sort of a select set. So they get access to a support specialist. We pay for their membership in a local law firm's sort of advice for nonprofits hotline, which tends to be almost exclusively about HR issues. It's actually an HR firm. We run something called the Top Talent Institute, which is workshop plus roundtable plus peer support. One of the most important things we've done is all of this is above and beyond the core grant or general operating grant that we provide this set of agencies. We had always said, hey, you know, call us also if there's some professional development need that you stumble across over the course of the year, or you find your so-and-so needs more of such and stuff. Nobody ever did. And if we just said, hey, it's here if you need it, they would spend it on something else if they could, right? Not because of anything inappropriate, but just there's always something that seems more critical, right? And so we finally just drew a box around it and said, everybody's in this program, you get, and it's not a ton of money, you get $2,500 for professional development only. It's use it or lose it, and you don't even have to tell us what it is. You can just give us the receipts, and at the end of the year, we'll give you this dollar amount, or if you want to access it as you go, it can be to send any staff member to a conference. Maybe somebody needs public speaker training. Maybe somebody wants to learn a little more about how to really work Razor's Edge because they don't understand the fourth tab. You know, whatever it is, we don't interfere. It's just so long as it's for professional development for staff, and some of these other things which I'll talk about further. Next slide. Interestingly, and just because this is so much, you know, what Yolanda and Rusty know so well, one of the support specialists who is requested most often by grantees in this program is the person who does HR and HR advice and support for the nonprofit sector here. And we have yet to find anybody else in town who does precisely what she does. And there's a list waiting for her to do this. So she'll go into the agency, sit down with whoever are the appropriate folks and review actual job descriptions one by one by one, help to rewrite them, help the senior leaders step back and look at how the whole thing is organized. You know, why is it that Tanya is both janitor and intake counselor? You know, I mean, the kinds of jobs that have tended to just grow over time because of some series of talents an individual person may have had when they joined the agency in 2003 or something. Anyway, and then the consultant will show them comparative nonprofit salary data that she culls and screens and customizes for each group depending on what they do, so they can see results from 8 different surveys. Here's what others in this town are paid for that very position that you keep worrying why nobody stays in at your agency. And look, your agency is spending, 40% less than your colleague one neighborhood over. So of course your people are leaving. So these mix of offerings, again, in addition to the general op grants that we provide to so-called core grantees, shake out in different ways for different agencies who use different aspects. With Spanish Coalition, we first met Gabriela when she joined the Top Talent Institute, and at that time she was development director. That institute is designed specifically for middle managers and senior staff who are not EDs, who very rarely have opportunities to come together with peers. When she became interim ED at her agency, we offered a coach and we convened a roundtable really for her of other people who we knew around town who were also in an interim role at that time, because that has its own challenges. One of our other support specialists helped their board overhaul, organize, evolve, and actually attended board meetings to observe and, kind of watch dynamics and all. Did the thing about the job descriptions, helped rewrite personnel policies, et cetera. So we get involved at varying levels depending on what an agency requests. We don't, barrel in and say, here's what we're going to do. We say, what do you need? Where are you under-investing versus overspending? And if you're under-investing in your talent, short of us literally increasing salaries, which is not something we can realistically do, how are other ways we can help you to get to where you need to be? Next slide. One of the additional programs, which I'll just mention really quickly, Peer Skillshare, is something we ended up ultimately doing for the whole sector here, but then handed off to Forefront, which is the regional association. Next slide. But initially we did it for our own grantees, which was recognizing that we were doing a lot of matchmaking anyway, saying to a DV group in one neighborhood working with a Hispanic population, hey, do you know about this DV group in another neighborhood working with a primarily Asian population? They have questions about how you handle the need for 2 different kitchens in your space. Can you talk to each other? Whatever. So we started this program. It was informal crowdsourcing, basically, where you could enter a need you had, a question you had, or a set of skills or expertise that you had, excuse me, and then we would match. And so it was really ran the gamut from an agency saying, man, I have the most problematic board share. We're trying to figure out how to diplomatically move that person to an emeritus or an advisory status. We'd love to talk to someone else who successfully did that. And we ended up, again, just initially doing this for our own grantees. Other agencies and funders heard about it, said, can we join? Can our grantees be part of the pool? Ultimately, we had about 16 foundations and their grantees and about 600 agencies in the pool. Next slide. And then we stopped and said, what the heck are we doing? In that really wasn't what we intended to do as a foundation, and we talked to Forefront, our local RAG and nonprofit association, and they've now taken it over, and they've also expanded it to be statewide. So it's really cool. Next slide. The respondents not only reported that their matches were terrific, but one of the really interesting things we found out that we hadn't really known was that whoever they were matched with, and it was just for a 3-hour session, right, to tackle a real specific thing, like, you're known for doing a terrific job with volunteer management. Can we see how you've got your system set up? And they'd have a 3-hour session together. Anyway, 51% report that they kept in touch afterwards and developed relationships, et cetera. Next slide. So we saw that as a piece of what, next slide, skip this one too. We saw that as a piece of what we think talent investing is just definitionally going to be about anyway, and is not a problem to us, which is we don't really care if the person we've invested in leaves the agency that we have supported up to that point, because, again, this is just anecdotal, but it's been our experience that people tend to stay in the field. I know, for example, one development director who I met through one of our grantees 7 years ago has now been development director at 4 other agencies that we also fund. So it is in our best interest, as well as those agencies, that the skills be strong, right? So it's okay if it's portable. It's okay if what we try to build is actually building the strength across the sector, not necessarily saying we only care about it if at this agency in this month, in March of 2017, this person is good at this one particular job at this desk. No, we have sort of a slightly bigger vision for what talent development ought to be. Top Talent Institute, again, I just briefly mentioned that. Next slide. We set this up because obviously a lot of the middle managers become executive directors, or we hope they will. We hope they stay in the sector and rise to that if it's of interest to them and fits their own skill set. The way it's set up, we have monthly meeting for 6 months. Some of the sessions are preset. Others are selected each cycle by that year's participants. They tend to focus heavily, again, on the HR aspects of being at their agency. The biggest absolutely is how to supervise. Every single person who's come through this institute has told us we are not taught that in the nonprofit sector. We're given a job and a kind of maybe a packet and a pat on the back and said, go to it, we know you can do it, and then we're left to figure it out. And so for them to learn that there are actually sort of structured ways of increasing the ability to supervise better and learn about what is managerial courage and how to train for maximum motivation on the part of your employees. These are learnable things, has been a really terrific aspect of what the Institute offers. Thank
Great.
you.
Thanks, Marianne. And I know there's a lot more you could talk about in terms of the background, how these things evolve, and we'll be able to come back to you later and talk more. I want to get in here Gabriela Roman to talk to us about your work at the Spanish Coalition for Housing, and what are the challenges? Give us a little background on the organization, and then not your challenges, but how have you prioritized staff development as an institution? How have you and your team participated in professional development opportunities, and what's been the impact on the team? So, Gabriela, happy to have you get your voice in here.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to speak with you regarding our experience working with the Pierce Family Foundation. So thanks to Fund the People for inviting us, I just want to start off by saying that, you know, although we're here talking about our experience, I know that we are one of many examples of organizations that have worked with the Pierce Family Foundation throughout the years. And I think it's an excellent model that, you know, more people should find out about it. So I'm really thankful for this opportunity. As Rusty spoke a little bit about our organization, we were founded in 1970 to address redlining and disinvestment in the Latino community. We are a HUD-certified housing counseling agency, and we primarily work with the Latino community. That's the reason we were founded to help the Latino community, but we also serve a lot of minorities and low-income families that do not have access to services in their communities. Some of the programs we offer are housing counseling, foreclosure prevention, financial literacy, rental assistance, and energy assistance. We have 3 offices in the city of Chicago, in the north side, in the south side, and in the west side. So we really offer citywide coverage. If you're familiar with Chicago, there is no east side. The east side is basically the lake. And as Rusty mentioned, we serve about 10,000 clients a year. So when our organization first started working with the Pierce Family Foundation, it had undergone tremendous growth. It started off as a one-person agency, and it was at that point about 40, and it went from 1 office to 3 offices. And I think the organizational development had not kept up with the growth in terms of the number of staff and the number of families that we were serving. So some of the staff development needs, of course, we had to make sure that our staff had very specific industry knowledge, such as homeownership, financial literacy, and foreclosure. And in the short time that I've been the executive director of the organization, I've concluded that for the most part, you can't find that specific knowledge off the street. You really have to develop people. So that's something that we have to work on continuously, is making sure that our staff has industry knowledge, and that they continue to update their knowledge as things change. Also, administrative knowledge such as human resources, accounting, and financial management. And then, of course, the soft skills that everyone needs, such as communication. Marianne mentioned management. Learning to manage is very important. And also conflict resolution. I think that ties in to the topic of dealing with HR issues. So we really felt that we feel that we need to invest in our talent and make sure that we not only have a strong leadership and a strong middle management, but that our program people are also learning so that they can be the best that they can be. And so if there's any opportunities for advancement, that they can grow and they can move up with our organization. I think our philosophy is helping promote from within and building our people so that they so that when the opportunity comes, that we can hopefully hire from within. So Pierce Family Foundation has many professional development opportunities, and I'll just talk a little bit about how some of them have helped us. Through the Top Talent Institute, we sent 12 families to, 12 of our employees through that program. I think one of the unique things about top talent is that it's people that are in the program field, working on financing, working on HR, working on facilities, and working on fundraising. And so you have all these employees from nonprofits that play different roles, and then they get to see how what everybody else does and see their full viewpoint. So I think by the time they finish Top Talent, they get to see the big picture of what does it take for an organization to be successful, and how their specific role is part of a bigger picture that they could all link into and they can contribute. As Marianne mentioned, they provided a lot of organizational development support, including bylaws, personnel policies, financial policies, a board manual, an annual work plan, job descriptions, and a salary scan. And I have to say that they were all very helpful, and within our funders, when I would speak to them about all the things that we were doing within the organization, they were very impressed, and that made them feel a lot better knowing that all these organizational development areas were being addressed, and they actually thought it was quite forward thinking of our part. Of course, we knew we had to do that, but they were very happy with it. And I also have to say that with the salary scan, it really helped with our employee retention. When we did the salary scan, our employees were getting paid less than the industry average, and now I think they're being paid a little bit above the industry average. So they are being paid well, and we're not really having any retention issues anymore. They also provide $2,000 for professional development, and I think one of the good things about that is that they don't tell us what to do with the grant that they give us. We basically decide what is our priority and who is it that we need to send. And so, you know, the $2,000 doesn't have to be for one person. It depends, you know, you could send, depends on what you're trying to do. It could be 2 or 3 people, but it really gives us a time to analyze what's going on in the organization and decide what is the best option for us. With the peer Skillshare program, not only was I a beneficiary, but I have participated 3 times as a coach, and 2 of the sessions that I've done have been in Spanish. So, I think it's a good part is not only do you get professional development, but you can help others get professional development. And I don't know if Marianne mentioned it, but each participant gets $100 for the Skillshare session, and it's beneficial to both organizations. And I think it's a very inexpensive model that can be replicated where you know, where you just talk to somebody that may be doing what you want to do, and they can share what are their best practices. In the article, the Fund the People article, I think part of the story is that I was at the development staff, and then we had a sudden departure of our executive director, and I became the interim director. And during that time, as Marianne mentioned, I was offered a coach, and one of the things that I really liked about having the coach is that I could talk with the coach about, you know, whatever challenges I was facing, and it was in a confidential manner, and I really received excellent advice. And you know, that was somebody that was working specifically with me. It wasn't, you know, she wasn't, you know, talking with the foundation or the board. It was somebody that could really help answer a lot of the questions that I had. And So some of the things that she helped me with is communication with the board in setting priorities and developing a draft work plan as an interim ED that I was able to get short-term successes in order to keep the organization going. And it eventually helped me become the permanent executive director after 9 months. And another development opportunities in the Pierce Family Foundation that I think foundations can also replicate as they have regular workshops maybe every 2 months, and they have topics that nonprofits are facing, such as labor laws or social media, financial reporting or technology. And what I like is that somehow they find the right consultants, people that, we wouldn't know who to find, and then they come and teach all the not just coaching grantees, but other organizations that Pierce is funding as well, and they share their knowledge. And I'll give you an example. So our accountant attended the financial reporting session, and when she came back, she created a financial dashboard based on what she learned, and she presented it to the board, and the board was very happy because that gave them a clearer picture besides the profit and loss and the balance sheet that they got on a regular basis, and they were very happy. So those are just some of the examples of, what we need and how we receive help. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Gabriela. And I think it's really a testimonial to your leadership and knowing how to tap into the resources you need to advance. And I think your story and the story you both have laid out speaks to the idea of the pipeline, which you also mentioned in the article, that when folks invest earlier in the pipeline, it helps people to move up effectively. And one thing that we've seen at Fund the People is that oftentimes women, people of color, younger people, queer people are being set up to fail when they're hired through executive transitions rather than being set up to succeed. And so providing and getting access to those kinds of supports for you at that, as an interim and new ED, is just a terrific resource that unfortunately not enough people are having access to. So we've had a question come in, and I wanted to throw it to Marianne, and it's also one we were thinking of already. So could you talk to us about the challenges facing the Pierce Family Foundation in supporting nonprofit staff development? Where are the hard or messy or challenging places?
Well, I think probably the first one is just a fundamental perspective that any foundation may have or not have regarding whether or not it even wants to support capacity building and all the related aspects of what that could mean. There are many foundations that, for reasons of their own, and everybody's different and everybody's is perfectly justified, are only doing quote-unquote program grants and restricting or earmarking grant dollars in really specific ways to really specific programs. And again, that funding is necessary as well, but what that often leaves out is the bread and butter, direct costs, real operationally oriented kinds of things that are very difficult for nonprofits to cover, and they represent the greatest costs. I think that's one of the reasons that we, in doing this work, also challenged ourselves to be very visible about it, because we also think there is a message that comes with everything we do as funders, because nonprofits tend to watch what you do and civic leaders tend to watch what you do. And so, for example, Gabriella mentioned the Peer Skillshare program. We actually determined philosophically at the beginning that those who participated in the program would be given a stipend to compensate for their time outside of the office, and for one side of these two-sided sessions, effectively being a trainer for the other. We don't call it that, but one's like the advisor and the other's the advisee, right? But each agency gets a $200 micro grant upon completion of the session. What does that do? That enables agencies to feel okay about letting somebody away from their desk for 3 hours who might not have the same privilege that an executive director has to come and go as she pleases. It also sends the message that this is important enough to us that we're going to make it really possible for you to do, so that nothing will get in your way. You don't have to raise the money to pay for a workshop to get somebody to go to one. We're going to actually compensate your time away. So there are funders who say, well, we don't want to be a part of that program. We want people to have some skin in the game. They should be paying for their own professional development. You know, to which we'd kind of say, well, that's like saying they should be paying for their own anything, you know, because we as donors are effectively paying for everything, right, at a nonprofit, except for what may come through earned revenue, in which case it's just a different way. So it didn't make sense to us to isolate that out. So sometimes there are philosophical challenges. I would say on the direct HR side, about who the real people are in the real jobs, there are two really big things, and I'll say them really quickly. One is the salaries this is a huge problem everywhere, and it's been internalized by a lot of nonprofits who, you know, sometimes it's even the ED who is resistant to trying to raise salary levels because this false equation is still at play where, well, that takes money away from the program, as if they are not, you know, intimately connected. The second is when we've sometimes seen foundations or colleagues who maybe no longer want to invest as much in staff development, and they're kind of saying, well, we don't know that it works, or it didn't work quickly enough, or, you know, we just weren't confident. It's often they're in for too short a period of time. You know, it's like, yeah, a 6-month intervention one time is not going to have the same results as something more long time. And also the reality that there are going to be things relative to human beings that no matter of intervention on the part of you as a funder can affect, right? There are people who are going to have personality dysfunctions, who maybe even have some mental health problems, but who are nonetheless sitting at the top of agencies, and you can send them to 1,000 leadership training programs, and if they are dysfunctional in some fundamental other way, it's very difficult, you know, to do much about that. And frankly, that's something nobody talks about. But I bet if who's ever on this call right now said, here are 5 agencies where we know really nothing's going to change until so-and-so is out of that job at the top, because, you know, we all know where those places are and when we get frustrated and when it comes down to being an individual personality issue. So that's just part of the reality to go in being aware of. And that's the kind of thing that's also hard to evaluate. You can't say in an evaluation, you know, this didn't go so well there because so-and-so has narcissistic personality disorder, right, or whatever, right?
Right. There is a limit to what we can do to change attitudes, and at a certain point, I always tell people, you know, if the ED really doesn't want to invest in themselves or the people around them or below them, and the board doesn't either, maybe at some point you got to go somewhere else if you're going to have a good workplace environment. But I need to move us to Gabriela. Here we have a question for you. If you could talk to you know, what the impact has been of your own commitment to staff development as well as resources from places like Pierce. What's been the impact on your organization?
So I have to echo what Marianne said. First of all, that it really, the executive director really has to believe in investing in their people, and really does not have to be afraid of people growing and even outgrowing the organization. So generally, I think just investing in our talent has made the organization stronger. And we don't just invest in a select few staff. In fact, we look at everyone. And if you haven't gone to training, you know, then we need to send you to training, because everybody in our organization has to go to training. And it really helps with the program staff improve their quality. When they come back, they have new skills that they can implement, and there's a great level of confidence, and they are, you know, they just having a training and feeling that they can do their job even better than before, and they come back with the new energy, and that helps develop our internal talent pool, so that if there's ever investment opportunities, which I have to say, you know, it's I would love to keep everyone in my staff, you know, keep them forever and ever, but I realistically, I know that's not going to happen. And so as people move on, as, you know, sometimes they move out of state, sometimes they go back to school, which is a good thing, then we have hopefully people that can grow with our organization. And I think it also, they feel good that that there's a future for them, that, you know, maybe they started as a receptionist, and they are growing and learning and going to training, and then they're going to be able to go on to the next job. In fact, I have a receptionist that she's really great. She was really great in customer service, and she wanted to get an advancement, and she tried 2 times previously, and the 3rd time it was an outreach position, and which I felt was a perfect match for her customer service skills. And so now she's doing that, and she's the top performer citywide for the program. So so that just, you know, I'm just so happy for her, and very proud of her, because our investment in her has paid off. So in general, I just think like investing in the people is an investment in the program. You're going to get, at the end of the day, you're going to get stronger programs, and you're going to have people with confidence and energy, and it's just going to translate to the day-to-day work that they do. Next slide, please. So as far as some of the lessons that, you know, we want to share with funders is that they are already investing in our organizations. So we feel that it is critical to invest in the people that are running the programs and the people that are running the organizations. At the end of the day, you're going to get a stronger organization. And another thing I want to point out is that you know, for example, right now in Chicago, in Illinois, we're having very challenging times. The state of Illinois doesn't have a budget, and so a lot of organizations who received state funding, they're seeing their programs cut, they're seeing staff levels reduced, and so often, you know, when that things happen, it's you concentrate on the programs, but then, you know, you forget about the people that are running the programs, and especially during these stressful times, they need the training to do more with less, and they also need, you know, to refresh their skills and be able to come back energized and to do the work that they have to do. And I think that funders can play a critical role in keeping professional development in the forefront. Some of the things they could do is they could include professional development as part of the grant. They could do separate grants for development. I know some foundations do that, and or they could start utilizing some of the practices that Pierce Family Foundation has, such as doing the workshops or even the peers, the skill sharing model. That's also one that it's not very expensive to replicate, and that can be done to help others. And this will ultimately help the organization continue to build the talent pipeline. You know, we're not going to all be around forever, and you know, we need to build new leadership so that our organization can continue to do the work that we're doing. Thanks.
Thank you. It's a great message and a great messenger for that. Okay, so we have some more questions. We're gonna from folks on the webinar. I'd encourage everyone to chat in messages or questions through the Q&A function. Okay. So this is a question for Marianne. How are specific individuals selected for the Top Talent Program? Are all core grantees represented? Are there more than one from each grantee? So this is a multi-part question that's very tactical. There are more parts of it. Who conducts the trainings? And how do you determine the impact or the key progress indicators? I know in the case, in the field story we wrote, you talked about, or the consultant who constructed the program talked about the participants creating their own agenda in terms of what they wanted to learn. So I'd love to hear you talk about that.
Sure. We evaluate with a before-after kind of survey tool that is very much self-reported data, but some questions are about the individual as an individual. You know, do you feel supported in your current workplace? Are there professional development needs you feel are not being addressed? To what extent? What, you know, et cetera, versus at the end, do you feel, you know, so we do that in interviews and all to document the experience of any particular group, but we don't do any long-term follow-up because it's not set up that way. In terms of who gets selected, it's conversations with the staff at the agencies. Often the ED will say, oh, I've got a new facilities manager, I'd love to send her to the next round. Former participants will tell others how valuable it was to them. So it's a little bit of word of mouth. Also, we have a somewhat unusual model where our two program officers are doing a lot of hands-on capacity development, capacity building work with the grantees rather than doing a lot of, you know, grant cycle management, which we keep pretty streamlined. So our other full-time program officer, his entire portfolio is only IT. He's like the den mother on IT issues to the grantees. And so he's back and forth and in and out of their spaces all the time, figuring out what went wrong with the server or whatever, right? And so a certain number of the recommendations will come from him where he'll say, oh, so-and-so's the new so-and-so, and they would love to do it. And then we, you know, we send an invite out to everybody. So and in terms of who leads different sessions, our other staff person structures the whole thing, but if we're doing a session on evaluation, we pull in a consultant who has that specialty. If we're doing one on financial training, and we have some budget in-house that, we're paying these trainers to come in for top talent sessions. One of the interesting things, just real quickly, is kind of off of what Gabriella said, some of the real needs coming up in the sector where funding staff and talent is going to become an even huger deal does relate to IT. If we're not already, we are very soon at the point where you can't kind of just assume somebody who sort of maybe is good at your social media gets stuck with doing it and becomes the accidental techie, or that the person who formerly was the best one at fixing the photocopy machine now is also in charge of your, CRM software. It just doesn't always translate, right? So here's a new position, that really didn't exist in the sector even 10 years ago, and you get now to an agency at a certain size, you really start shooting yourselves in the foot as staff leaders if you don't have somebody who really is up on all things tech and media related.
Yeah, so the technical functional skills keep changing, and there's those needs, and then there's the leadership and compensation issues, leadership development, compensation. So there's a whole variety of types of investments that you're touching on and that funders can make. I want to remind folks as we are reaching the top of the hour here that we are planning to go until 15 after, so 3:15 Eastern time. So hopefully you all can stick with us. Also, you've heard referenced an article from Fund the People. We'll tell you more about that. If you haven't already seen that, we'll tell you how to get that at the end. I want to ask Gabriella, you mentioned in the article, you say, from my experience, it's been better to develop our own people than to hire from the outside because our line of work is narrow. I definitely want to develop a pipeline of leaders so our organization can replenish itself. And you sort of gave us the example of the receptionist who's now an outreach program or services person. But can you talk any more about what you see in terms of that internal hiring and promotion versus external? We know that most executive hires come from outside organizations and nonprofits, not the internal ones like the experience you had. And can you talk about how you're thinking about building this internal pipeline? I know I'm putting you on the spot.
Sure. It's a lot of questions, but no, I don't think. I think we are both open to hiring internally and hiring externally, but through our own experience, we have found that the transitions are a lot easier when you hire people from within. We are a very high-performing organization, so we do have high standards, and it's I just feel like it's easier to train people that already know our standards than people that come with different standards. And so, but we've tried both hiring externally and internally, and when we have job openings, it's open to both, but we just have found that people that are hired from within are much more successful, and so we want to make sure that that as we move forward, that we have that option available of making sure that people from within can move up, and I have to say that our entry-level employees, they are so dedicated to the mission, and they want to grow with the organization, and they say yes, we will take the training. send us to the training even though, we're not doing that. We want to learn. We want to figure out how we can help the organization better, become stronger, help our clients more. So it wasn't something that, we had a philosophy with. I think just through practice and experience, that's what became our conclusion. And so now that we decided, because just it's such a niche field that we're in, that we said, well, we're going to make sure that if we do have job openings, we're going to have people that are ready for them.
Mm-hmm. And I've been telling people that working and running in nonprofits is harder than almost any other job out there, and more important than many of those jobs. That's just my opinion. But yeah, there are specific knowledge areas and skill sets that the housing field has and that other fields have, and so we're open to more questions from folks. I have some more questions here, but please do feel free to use the Q&A or the chat to submit some more questions. I wanted to ask Gabriella, to get a little more granular, how are you at the coalition identifying the professional development needs of your staff? Are you doing that formally, informally? How does that kind of happen for you?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both, but since we are in the specific field, we want to make sure that in housing counseling that all the employees have training related to what their job is. But we also get people who come to us and say, I know I'm working at this job right now, but if there's an opening in the future, I would really like to advance with the organization. And those people, you want to support them, and because we have good employees, but that they're not ready yet. If there were an opening, that they're not ready. So what we do with them, since they have identified that they want to advance, what we do with them is develop. I work with our HR staff, and we sit down with them and say, well, in order for you to get to that level, these are the trainings that you need to go to. These are the skills that you need to develop. And so we will send them to the training, and that way when an opening does become available, they will be ready.
That's great. So you're kind of pairing their skills development with the organization's staffing needs and with jobs and roles that may open up for them in the future. That's a great
right. And we also have an idea of what job openings are coming up, because we're working on developing projects, and there's funding opportunities that we know are pretty good, and so we can plan ahead and know, like, something might be coming down 6 months down the line, and we can, if they would like to be considered for that position, then we can work with them, and we have some time so we can get them better prepared.
Right. Great. I want to turn to Marianne and ask you how you talk to folks about this. So, two-part question here. First, how do you sit down and talk to EDs or other people at grantee organizations in such a sensitive area where you're asking about, do people have the skills they need? Do you as the executive director have the support, the salary? These are very kind of sensitive areas, and we know nonprofit folks may fear that they're going to be judged or defunded, or there's all these things you talked about earlier around the myths and the attitudes within nonprofits. So how do you do that in a way that's respectful and sensitive, but also gets you the information you need so that you can be responsive to the real needs there?
That's a great question. Two things. I think the fear that this is somehow a judgment, that if we ask a certain question, that question itself, implies assessment, and could that mean their funding will, suffer as a result. Some of that is alleviated in this core grantee cluster because the commitment is for 5 years. So unless something extraordinary happened where we would say, you know what, we're not going to continue, which it never has, anybody we accept into that cohort, there's sort of a collective sigh of relief that they know we truly are going to be with them over that long haul. So there's a little less anxiety. And at the beginning, we have a 6-part kind of fun and easy organizational health checklist that I'd be happy to share with anyone who wants it, where one of our staff or one of our support specialists goes at the beginning of their core grantee term and sits down with whoever the agency wants and just quickly runs through it. And it's like, it's both a little bit of education about best practices in the nonprofit sector, but also a little temperature taking where we can say, you feel good about this, you're in good shape on this. If not, who might be assigned to work on it? And so that takes, maybe an hour and a half to sit down and quickly kind of spin through it. But at the end, we then have a handy list of, oh, well, they believe all their workstations are in terrible shape in terms of IT hardware, but their software is actually in great shape because they just brought in Little Green Light and updated their donor management software, whatever it may be, to things that are harder to necessarily identify the instant solution, but at least let us know, well, this might be an area we can begin working on with you. And often it's a series of conversations with the agency. We feel like this is critical for us. And most of the time, they know. I mean, the groups really know. If somebody would step in and give us some support around this aspect of our own organizational development, we know that area ABC is what we need to work on next. But to this point, we haven't had the time, the space, anybody's focused attention in order to work on that.
Right. So I hear you. It's a combination of sort of that assessment in writing and thinking internally at the nonprofit, combined with a series of conversations, all in the context of a longer-term relationship where it's not, there's not money on the coming on or off the table in the short term.
Right.
So
they know we're going to renew.
Right.
And
right.
And that makes a big difference. There's some trust there, right? From the beginning as a result.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, thank you for that. As we come to the close of our time here, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Yolanda to share some next steps and resources for you all. So thanks to our guest speakers, and I'll turn it over to Yolanda.
Hi, everyone. I just want to send my sincere thanks on behalf of Fund the People to Marianne, Sylvan, and Gabriela Roman for sharing their interesting stories with us today about what talent investing looks like, what it feels like, and how other funders and nonprofits can learn about how to do this work within their organizations and among their grantees. So we hope that you found this useful and informative webinar. And as a follow-up, we will be sharing the PowerPoint slides from today's presentation. And I'll also be asking Mary Ann for the nonprofit organizational checklist that she mentioned earlier. You'll also receive a brief survey for us to gather your feedback about today's webinar. And we will also share a link to our webinar recording, both for those that were on the call and for those who registered and who weren't able to join us today. And we encourage you to share the webinar link with your colleagues to share the learning of today's webinar. So we have some upcoming webinars happening in June and September, and we will share those details shortly with you. If you're not already signed up to receive Fund the People information in our e-newsletter, please visit our website at fundthepeople.org and click on the subscribe button so you can start receiving communication from us. We have coming up the release of our Fund the People toolkit, which includes the stories that we have published featuring the Pierce Family Foundation, the Spanish Coalition for Housing, and 5 additional funders that are sharing their experiences in talent investment among their grantees. So we hope that you'll take advantage of this toolkit once it's released. And also, we have the second annual Fund the People Funders Retreat happening on June 28th through the 30th in Sausalito, California. We have more information about the retreat on our website, and please feel free to contact us for more information. We'd like to thank you for joining us today. Thank you for your interest, and we look forward to seeing you on a future webinar. But before I go, I want to make sure that if you have follow-up questions for today's presenters, you have their contact information in front of you on this slide, and it will also be in the deck, the PowerPoint deck that we will email to you in the next day or so. So thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you in a future webinar or learning opportunity. Have a great day.